thank you all for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time. This is an important topic, and I'm quite excited really to kind of lead a discussion about it. But let me just say a few things first about today and the kind of rules of the road. So you may notice there's a camera over there. So we make a recording of this, and that is so that your colleagues and peers can also have access to this information. So we'll make a recording of today's presentation, and that'll be posted on the website, the Provost website, under Academic Affairs Faculty Forum. We'll also, they're actually already posted the PowerPoint slides, and at that website there's a space for you to send your thoughts and ideas as well as your colleagues. So we recognize that in an academic calendar in the week, there is absolutely no time when everyone can make it to an event. So we choose the best we can, but we do have this tradition of making a recording. If you're really looking for something to do, the prior 15 faculty forums are all on that website, and you could binge right through those 15. I looked at last night. I counted them. I was a little surprised, but this has been the tradition. To have these 2 to 3 times in the academic year, to engage in conversation about topics that are important to us all. And so today's topic is about first-year student success. And what I want to do is start, like any good professor might, with a non-functioning ticker. No, I don't think so.
No, not there, up here. Yeah.
No?
You got it.
Oh, I got it. There you go. What I want to do is start with defining my terms. So I'm going to start with some general things about our topic today, but I think it's worthwhile to take some time to do this. So first-year student success, what is it that we're talking about? So, what is a successful experience in a student's first year at the university? Well, of course, it's a lot of things, right? It's achieving the learning outcomes that we want. Have they got the information from the courses that they took? Did they achieve the information and the skills that we hope they'd learn in that course? Are they prepared to progress? And those two things, of course, overlap, right? If you got the learning outcomes you wanted from the course, you should be ready to progress. But they're not the same, right? Because you're also, we hope, students are learning about how to be college students in their first year. So they're learning what they learn in that course, but we hopefully, for a successful experience, they're also learning about how to manage time and how to study and how to engage in material and how things are more general skills that prepare them to succeed. They might pass all their courses, but they might be all the wrong courses that prepare them to go on and be successful in the next year. So we want them to be prepared coming out of their first year. We all know that there's a lot. What happens is not all in the classroom. And again, while at the University of Maine, just like most universities, we're diversifying in how we think about who our students are and who we want to attract to the university. Led by the Division of Lifelong Learning, we're reaching out to working adults. But the reality is the lion's share of our students are traditional age. They're coming here. The majority of the students who are in their first year here are coming right out of high school, or maybe have had a year, gap year as they call it. Many of them are coming, they're living away from home for the first time. They're living with strangers, people that they have not met before. They're interacting with people who are quite different from them in terms of their backgrounds, their cultural experiences, their appearances. They're have levels of freedom that they may not have had previously. They're exposed to a variety of things that they might not have encountered previously in their life. So there's a whole lot that goes on, socially, emotionally, personally, in that first year. And I think in that success, right, that's part of success. I think you probably all can think of students who were just aces academically, but couldn't manage to be a successful college student. And then I think at least there are probably other pieces of first-year student success, but satisfaction is one as well. Was it a positive experience for the student? Did the students feel like, yeah, this is I've been treated respectfully. This is a place that I want to be. my experience, not every single moment of it, right, but my experience in general was satisfying, so that they want to come back and continue their education with us. Now, there's a whole host of ways to measure all of these things, so there's literatures on how to measure them. There's more or less valid measures. I'm going to talk about a pretty gross measure, which is retention. And retention is a proxy, I would suggest, for all of these variables, and probably others that I haven't thought of. But it's important, right? All of these things relate to whether or not the student continues and perseveres on toward earning his or her degree. So for today's discussion, I'm going to talk a lot about first-year retention. And first-year retention is, basically the student who starts here in the fall, do they come back to continue their education the following year? Those of you who might be chilly, you can stand by the radiators, they're on. And they're pumping out the heat. So that's our area of discourse. Now, I am going to take just a minute to talk a little about why should we give a darn about first-year student success and first-year retention. I've worked here, probably heard me say, this is my 32nd year here at the university. I've probably been in 100 or maybe 1,000 conversations about student success of various types. But I do think it's worthwhile to just sort of reflect for a minute about why is this important for us to be concerned about. And there are some basic things. I mean, one is that this is our mission, right? Yes, we're a research university, and our mission is to produce new knowledge. Our mission includes producing new knowledge. And we're a land-grant university, and our mission is to tie with our state and to contribute to its economic and cultural and social development. Those things are all true and part of our mission, but we all recognize that at the heart of our mission is educating students. And that's important for the state of Maine. It's the reason why our biggest donor to the University of Maine is the legislature, right? They're still covering about 35% of our costs. It's because we serve the state in this way, in a variety of ways, but the primary is by educating students. So one could question how well we're fulfilling our mission if 1 out of 4 of those students don't come back to continue their degree. Right? It could raise some concerns about, well, are you really doing what you said you would do, what your mission is? I think we should care about it and be concerned about it because I think it also has to do with our values as an institution, about who we are. We are not an elite institution that only accepts students who are at the top academically or at the top financially. Right? We are not a place that is elite. We don't define ourselves or our strength by all the people we exclude. And I say that with pride, right? I think that's a good part of who we are. It makes our job more challenging than an institution that is elite, that can take only the very top students. But it is part of who we are, what the University of Maine is about. I'm going to share with you some data in a minute that show that students who are, so we all know that there are students who are in the first in their families to come here and to pursue a college education. No one in their family has obtained that goal before. And I'll show you some data to show that with those students we don't do as well. Fewer of them come back for their second year. Fewer students who are less well off financially come back for their second year. Right? That's important because I think, this is our values. This is what we say we're about. We're an institution that's about helping people to change. I got a bunch of siblings, but I got 2 older brothers, and they both kind of made their careers in business, and they all do way better than I do financially. But we have conversations about career, and I often say to them, we're in the business of changing people's lives, and that's a pretty great business to be in. Taking people who have one sort of range in what they think about themselves and the world and who they are and their possibilities, and we're in the business of helping them change that and to achieve wider things. We want to do that with, well, at least I want to do that, and I think you should too, with every student who walks through the door, or at least most of the students who walk through the door. It's important for us to be concerned about this because of our reputation. And I mean that in the small sense, the local sense, about how we're thought about in the state of Maine, are we thought about as a place where students can come and truly can achieve, and we provide opportunities and we provide the supports they need to succeed? Or are we perceived as, even though we're quite a modest-sized research university, in the state of Maine, we're the big institution, or are we perceived as an institution, that big institution where students come in, get chewed up and spat out? To me, that's very important. It's also important of our reputation large, nationally. How well you do in terms of keeping students at your institution is a benchmark of your success. It's in U.S. News and World Report. It's in all these other common measures of a university's success. So it's important in that sense. And even though it's somewhat crass, and I put it last because it's not the driving reason, but it is part of it should be part of our thinking. And if we're more successful at keeping students moving and progressing to degrees here at the university, it's good for our bottom line. It helps us to be a more successful institution. I did some quick calculating, looking at just in the first year, if we were to change by 5%, if we were to improve by 5%, the number of students who we retain from year 1 to year 2, just in that first year would be about $1.5 million in revenue to this institution, with which we can turn and do good things. If we sustain that over time, it's roughly about $4 million of revenue coming into the institution. It's something that we should be mindful of. Now, what about retention at the University of Maine? What do we look like? Well, as I said, I've worked here a long time, had a lot of conversations, and we have looked at this thing in a variety of ways, including back when they put together the Blue Sky Strategic Plan. And we had a very specific goal, that's quoting from the Blue Sky Plan. We will improve annual student retention by 5%. And I think most people know here, we evaluated the Blue Sky Plan. We published a report about what we achieved in that. And let me show you the data. You can tell me whether we achieved what we said we would. Dark blue is the Blue Sky years. The report came out in 2012, and these are the 5 previous years. So, not real exciting, right? I don't know if someone else can make more of that, but to me it looks like we didn't move it. We did the budget, and in fact, there's some hints that it might be a little lower in these years. I say with no pride at all that in the summer of 2014 we published the Provost Action Plan for Retention and Graduation. Congratulations, Jeff. We did not succeed in that area. Now I'm going to show you some data that I think can account for this deterioration, or maybe it's just statistical waggling around. I became a dean here this year, and I was on a committee that a provost at the time put together called, the acronym was GRIT, and it was graduation, retention, and other stuff. And then, so we looked back prior 10 years, and I don't have it memorized, but it looked like this. So we're pretty stable. So if you're sitting there, you likely are thinking, okay, so what's different now? Why should, in the 2018-19 academic year, we focus on this? Isn't it just the way it is, and we should just kind of be okay with that? So I'm going to try to convince you that no, it's not okay, 1, and 2, we're in a better position now to impact this and to make some change. So let me start with a little bit about why we should care. I'll just share real quickly the things that you know. The state of Maine has the oldest median age in the United States. I think you know about the demographics of our state. The traditional age students who come here right out of high school, there are fewer and fewer of them each year in graduating from Maine high schools, and there are fewer and fewer from New England high schools. If we're going to fulfill our mission in serving the state by producing educated people, we need, in my opinion, to do a better job with those who get here. Right? To walk away from 25% after year 1 isn't a successful formula for us moving forward. Companies need educated workforces. That's a headline, that's the Bangor Daily. I'm sure you see these headlines frequently. The system put out some information about just one area about nursing. And the need for nursing, newly trained nurses, is tremendous and is going to get stronger as the baby boomers go into retirement. If you've seen Dean Humphrey give us talk about the need for engineering, it's the same thing. We need to produce more educated people, and it's not just in these narrow professions. What companies, by and large, are saying, we need an educated workforce. We can teach them to do the specific things, but we need people who can think critically, who can write, who can communicate, who can work on teams and work creatively. So if we're going to fulfill our mission, we need to be doing better in terms of the students who arrive here. So that's my reason number one. As I said, I've been in a lot of these conversations, and invariably someone will say something like, well, the students just aren't ready. They're not ready. Or you get a variant of, when I was in college, we all read Shakespeare every night and did calculus problems with breakfast just to loosen our brains. And kids now, they don't do that anymore. They're not prepared to succeed. I'm going to show you some data, not right now, but in a minute, to show you that, how well prepared a student is an important factor in whether or not they're successful. There's no question about it. What we are doing is looking at the student body that makes up the University of Maine. And we have taken some steps to kind of shift that body so that the students are, in general, better prepared. And I'll show you some evidence of that. We're part of the University of Maine system's one university concept, and one way we're seeking to define ourselves and have had some success is to say the University of Maine is part of this system, and we want to be the university where students aspire to get to. And we want to work with the other institutions to partner so that students can get to us. So one thing we did, in 2016, we eliminated the Omron program. The Omron program was really, if you had any involvement with it, a very good kind of second chance program for students. But its mission really matched the mission of University of Maine at Augusta better than ours. And so we stopped doing it. We worked with the University of Maine at Augusta to direct students who would be interested in that program there. In 2017, we stopped admitting students into our foundations program. We used to take about 100 or sometimes more than that students into a program that were it was called foundations, they were just below our normal acceptance rate, our acceptance indicators, and we put them into to the foundations program. We've also then, through partnerships, worked with this year, University of Maine at Augusta has about 35 of those students taking classes, and we've created a pathway for them to get to the university, but they're not in our set. And so the result of that, I'm just showing you the last few years. What I've given you is the middle section of SAT, and SAT's flawed, we all know that, but it's a gross measure of your preparedness. Each year we've been able to bump up the level of the 25th percentile on the SAT. So we're taking fewer students who are in this lowest quartile of the distribution. We're moving the distribution up a little bit. First years had no impact on the upper end, but this year I was actually encouraged that we even shifted the upper end of the distribution a little bit. So we're working to have students who come here really have the capability to succeed. As I mentioned, we're doing it in partnerships with other sister institutions in the system. We're also building better relationships with the community college. I see Scott Dunning back there. The School of Engineering Technology has been a leader in that. We have pathways for students to start at the community college, enter the School of Engineering Technology, and earn their degree in 4 years total, if they do what they need to do at the community college before they get here. This year, we're getting more involved in this sort of early college, and we're doing some innovative programs where we're working with high schools to give students University of Maine credit, but more importantly, to prepare them to be better prepared to succeed when they come here to the university. So we are working on that sort of, if the students were just smarter, we'd do better, right? We're working on that piece of it. But again, we're never going to get only the elite students, and I don't think we should. So that's my second reason why I think now is a good time. My third has to do with the changing landscape in higher education throughout the United States. This idea that, well, college just isn't for everybody, and yep, sure you have a high failure rate, and really, in some ways, if you look at the way universities are are ranked and evaluated, you're kind of you get credit for not admitting people, and you know there's this idea that you got to just be smart enough. Well, that's a problem for our country, right? We need to do a better job. We all know these things. We're less of a manufacturing company. Higher education has become more important for people to be successful and have a fair crack at a middle class or an upper middle class lifestyle. So there's a nationwide discussion about how we can do this better, and there are some universities that really are being quite innovative. And I put this headline from Georgia State. This is from their website, but it was them bragging about getting an APLU award for the impact that they'd had on student success. And one aspect of it was using kind of big data analytics to do a better job of working with students to get them on a path to success. That's not the only thing they've done at Georgia State. They've done a lot of really interesting things to help students succeed. If you know anything about Georgia State, it's an open access university. You apply, you get in. It's about 70% African American. They have now closed the gap between underrepresented students and non-underrepresented students in terms of retention and four-year graduation rates. Now, they didn't do it like that. They've been working at this for about a decade. But they have done a lot of innovative things to lead to change. So there are models out there, and there are folks in other institutions that we can learn from. I'll give you one other example, and you know, I'm sure you know that Arizona State University has done a lot of things around changing the way they go about education. I had the opportunity to go visit that campus not this summer, but the summer before, and learn a bit about what they were doing. One of the ideas I thought was really great was this idea, and this is actually from a New York Times article back in 2015, about their online freshman program. It's got a good name to it. Oh, Global Freshman Academy. That's what they call it, Global Freshman Academy. But I was talking to the provost there, and he explained how they got there. He said, you know, we're also actually open access, or they were open access. They're now a little bit selective. But most of our students came in and needed to take college algebra. So then we looked at college algebra. And at that time at Arizona State University, 50% of the students got a C or better in college algebra, and 50% got a D or better. He said, so we thought about that. I thought, let's think about the dynamics of that. You come to Arizona State University, you write a big check to take courses, including at that time maybe $500 or $600 to take college algebra. They took your money, and then we said, you know, it's kind of a flip of the coin. You know, you might get it. Good luck to you. And then they thought that doesn't make sense. So this academy, they flipped things around. They put a high quality college algebra online. They made it available for free for anyone to take it. Now what they did was then they said, okay, if you got to take it, not just sit in the classes, but you do the quizzes, you do the tests, and at one point you'll get an email if you do well that says, students who perform like you did on the quiz and last read quizzes and tests, 90% of them earn a B or better if they take the final exam. Would you like to take the final exam? And you can choose to take it or not. If you choose to take it, most of the students end up getting a B. But then they get a message to say, congratulations, you've completed the class. If you want, and this has cost them nothing so far, if you want Arizona State University credit, you can pay for the credit now. It's not paying for the credit ahead of time and saying, well, there's a 50-50 chance you'll get it. It's saying, you got it. You want it? Just pay us the money. Turning things around on their head. Now, I'm not saying that every university can do that, but I just give these as examples where universities are thinking very differently about how to approach this problem, or these challenges. The other thing I got to do last year was, as part of it was a grant from the Gates Foundation to an organization called the Association of Chief Academic Officers. And you put in an application. I was selected. There were 31 of us, provosts from around the country, and we spent a year, and they called us digital fellows, where we went to meetings, four meetings, and we had to take on a project. And my project partner, Jen Tyne, I see in the back there, we took on a project around Calculus 1. But the work was focused on gateway courses, these courses that are, most first-year students take and that tend to have high failure rates, and looking at using more contemporary courseware, digital tools that are more sophisticated approaches. Now I'm going to stop here for a second and say, just because I'm talking about math education is not why the president. She told me she's at 3:30. It's just a coincidence that the math education expert is leaving. So thank you. Anyway, what I learned a lot in that year about these digital tools. So one, I just took one to put up here in Alex. So Alex uses artificial intelligence as a individualized learning experience for students. So if you're taking this and you get a problem wrong, Alex knows what error you made and then sends you down this path to learn the right skills before it gets you back. And another student gets the same problem wrong, but because of a different type of error, that student goes down a different path and brings you back to being on track. There are a host of these tools. Every one of us in this Digital Fellows Program had to do a project. And again, I worked with the math department, and Jen Tyne was the lead, and Natasha Spear helped a lot too, and so did Nigel. But they brought the team together around using something called Pearson Mind Math Lab, which we had been using before, but now we're using more of its fuller capabilities, and we're using it in a more sophisticated way. I'll leave it to that. You can ask Jen for details. But my point is, there are tools out here that even 5 years ago didn't exist. And if they existed then in their kind of beta form, and now they've reached a level of maturity. There's also a network of people nationally who are evaluating these tools. So I can show you a place where you can go and you can click on Alex, and it'll show you what universities are using it, and they've created a rubric on how to evaluate it. So you know what Alex is sort of pretty good at and what it's not so good at. And it's not McGraw Hill who developed this, who do that. This was from another grant from Lumina Foundation to create this this site for university users just to have a dialogue about these tools. Right? So there are opportunities now that just did not exist before for us to move ahead. Let me now get a little more local. So we have here a tool at the University of Maine called Academic Performance Solutions. So this is a screenshot of my screen this morning. Academic Performance Solutions is about looking at data to help us to do a variety of things better, but to look at how we schedule courses, to look at the relationship between types of faculty and course performance, doing lectures versus tenure stream at different level, to look at different groups of students. I won't, and I purposely did this as a screenshot so I wouldn't be tempted to start to fool with it, but you can, all I've got here is very gross, this academic year, and that's how many students. There's the colleges and the trends over the last 3 years in credit hours. But it could break this down. I could choose a different term. I could choose, I could exclude the Hutchinson Center if I wanted to. I could look only at the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. I could break this down by the type of course. I could look at every single math course if I wanted to. I could look at math courses only at a certain level. You can break things down all the way to the course level to look at the enrollment trends, the success trends in these data. Right? These are sophisticated tools. This is on the desk of every dean now at the university. It's on the desktop of most of the associate deans and most of the department chairs. And we are continuing to roll it out to have training for department chairs and associate deans and actually anyone who's interested in doing this. Deb Allen in the Office of Institutional Research is our kind of lead on this and our #1 user. I was at the EAB office earlier this week and they showed me the #1 user, most frequent, is Deb Allen at the University of Maine. And anyone want to take a guess, and Jeff can't because I already gave this. Who do you think is the #2 user? It's not me. Dean Emily Haddad. Congratulations. Haddad, the #2 user of Academic Performance Solutions. So my point is, there are tools now that we have available to us that were not available before. We've always had, or we've been fortunate for the last decade or more to have a strong IR office. But there's only a certain amount, it's a strong, small IR office, and there's only a certain amount of work that they can do. This tool has allowed us to export a lot of that work to closer to the folks who need it, and allowing IR to take on some other tasks for us. The other tool we're going to be bringing on this year, we're part of all this, also part of the company EAB, we're part of something called the Student Success Collaborative, and this is their propaganda. Basically, it will be a tool. The tool is called Navigate, and we will be bringing Navigator. We are bringing Navigate to the University of Maine. And what it is, eventually any advisor or any faculty member will have a dashboard on his or her computer, and when a student comes in, you click and call up that student. You get all the information about them, as well as information we can get from kind of big data and our own data. So looking at, for example, students who got a C in this course, what are the probabilities they'll pass these next courses? So that you can do data-informed advising the students. Navigate also is an early alert system that will, as much as faculty want to contribute, you can put in attendance if you want to, quiz grades, and we can set things up automatically so that a student can get an alert. The faculty member doesn't have to write it, just give the decision rules. And if they put in attendance, the student can get an alert on their phone saying, I see you missed the second class in a row this week. Please see your advisor. Or here we've made an appointment for you at the writing center, at the math lab, or at another reason. We can design this so that we're doing a better job communicating with students, and we're bringing better and more easily accessible data to our faculty and our professional advisors. Oops, I went backwards. To bring this to the advising task. Now, EAB will be here on October 10th and 11th. October 10th, we've got a group of our professional advisors who will get a demonstration of Navigate. And October 11th, we've got a group of faculty. Are there any slots left, Jeff?
There are.
So there are slots available on October 11th, and if you'd like to see this tool demonstrated, I have seen it. I find it extremely impressive. Contact Jeff St. John, and he'll get you in to the demo. The goal is to have this piloting with the groups this spring, and work toward a larger rollout by next fall. Okay, so trying to give you 4 answers of why the heck should we pay attention to this now, whereas we've been talking about it for decades. Right? It's because it's more important than ever, I would suggest. It's because we are addressing one of the most common issues that people point, which is students aren't prepared. We are working to bring in and have students who are better prepared to succeed. It's because there are models out there that we can steal and borrow from. I like to joke to say I have never had an original idea in my life, but I recognize good ideas and I'm willing to steal them. And I think that's the philosophy that we should take to this. And 4, we have tools now, we as not just alumni hall, we as in this institution has tools and will soon have tools that we can allow us to do things in a more sophisticated and data informed than we have historically. All right, so now let me I want to take a little time to share a little bit about what we know about first year success, define the way I defined it, at the University of Maine. So where are we at? I showed you the big graph. These are data the last 3 years. So look at the average of the last 3 years, 76% of students return. So is that good or bad? Well, it depends, right? So one way we decide whether something's good or bad is to look at comparison groups. So I'm going to give you 2 comparison groups here. One is the Hanover selected peers. Not Hannaford, you can't get it. The Hanover selected peers. So those of you who are paying attention to the process that the system went through around a budget creation, they hired a consulting company to go out and find peer institutions on literally 100 or more variables. They looked at how similar they were to UMaine. Their budget, the types of students they have, the types of faculty they have, the regions of the country they serve, et cetera, et cetera. And they created a set of peers for us. Our peers are 8 institutions, if I remember them right. They're Montana State University, North Dakota State, South Dakota State, University of Idaho, University of Wyoming, University of Rhode Island, UNH, and University of Vermont. If you take the average of those 8 institutions, they average 81% first year retention. So we don't look so good. Now, I'll be honest with you, if you take UNH and Vermont out of that, this drops down to about 78%. Still higher than us slightly, but but closer. So that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is to say, well, how do we do against our competitors? Right? So our competitors, particularly for out-of-state students, are the other New England land-grant universities. We look at students who've applied to the University of Maine and been accepted to the University of Maine and didn't come here. And what we can do is go to this thing called the clearinghouse and see where did they go to school. If they're from out of state, the most common place they went to was another New England land-grant university. And compared to those peers, we're doing much worse. If you look at only the New England land grants, they average an 88% first-year retention. So we have work to do. All right, let me show you a little bit about what we know about our students and who stays and who goes. So if they're from the state of Maine, again, these are last 3 years averages, 77%. If they're from out of state, it's 72%. So when I showed you that graph earlier about what happened over the last 3 years, my belief is that we've slipped down a little bit, and that's not just random, statistical variation. It's because we've taken larger and larger percentage in our first year of out-of-state students, and we're doing a little worse with respect to those students staying on at the University of Maine. If we look at our international students, we do all right, certainly compared relatively or the same as with in-state. What do we know about in terms of some of the kind of typical background information? I already mentioned this, that if you look at students who are the first in their family to come to college, they have no one in the family who's got a college degree, there's quite a difference. What's that? 9 percentage point difference in whether or not they stay. If you look at students who are eligible for Pell Grants, as an indicator of their financial stability, we do worse with Pell eligible students than non-Pell eligible. If you look at students who are from underrepresented groups, primarily African American in this case, we do quite a bit worse in terms of retaining those students at the University of Maine. Now, I will tell you, this makes us a lot like most institutions in the United States of America, particularly most publics. This is a pattern that you see. That doesn't make it okay, but it is the pattern that you see. And then when I was talking earlier about values, this is what you don't feel so good, at least I don't feel so good about, right? Take this group. We are growing the number of underrepresented students at the University of Maine. I think, Robin, we're at like 1,600 roughly. Students who identify as students of color here at the University of Maine. That's quite an increase, and we expect to and anticipate continuing that number to continue to grow. I think that's good for us as an institution. I think it's good for the state of Maine, but we need to look at how we succeed with those students. I was at a meeting recently, so I can't give you my source, but well, I can give you the source. It was the CAB meeting, but I don't know their source. But they said that by the year 2023, the percentage of high school graduates in the United States who are underrepresented will top the 50% mark. So there'll be more underrepresented students than represented students if you get your head around that graduating. We also have a gender difference at the University of Maine. Not a big one, but we have a gender difference where female students are more likely to continue on into their second year. I talked a little bit about preparation and how well prepared are these students to succeed. So I'll show you some data. You can look at preparation in a variety of ways. One thing we do here at the university when students apply, every student gets a rating on, they call it the C index. And the C index is essentially basically a equally weighted high school GPA and SAT scores. And it's called the C index. For those of you who remember Dean Charlie Slavin, lovely member of our community, he came up with this. So they call it the Charlie index, and then they cut it down to the C index. So every student gets put on the C index. So here's what happens on the C index. So this is your C index score, and this is whether or not you return for your second year. So, not surprisingly, right, students who are less well prepared, as indicated by high school GPA and SAT, are less likely to return. And as their preparation, they get stronger in their preparation, they're more likely to succeed and stay. I think this is kind of interesting. I'm not really sure what to make of it. The very tip-top group, we have a little bit of a a decrease. I suspect that they're going to other institutions, and God bless them, they're probably going to succeed at those institutions. I'm not going to worry about it. The other thing I think of when I look at this, you talk to people and they say, well, what's the retention rate at UMaine? And I say, well, it's about 75, 76%. I say, well, no, at Bowdoin, it's 90%. And I think, oh, big effing deal, because this is all the students you take. You only take these students, right? We could be 90%. Again, it gets back to our mission. Part of our mission is taking these students. That's part of who we are and our role. But the reality is we've got to recognize that there's variability in how prepared students are. And how do we use this information to do a better job to help them be successful? The other thing that we've known for a while, and I'll just show you the different ways of looking at it, is what happens in their first semester has a big, big impact on whether or not they continue on here at the University of Maine. But if you can't read in the back, that's a first semester GPA of less than 1.5. They're very unlikely to come back for a second year. Those students are on some kind of probationary thing anyway, a super secret suspension, but they do have an opportunity to come back, and very, very few of them do. Between a 1.5 and a 2, between a 2 and a 2.5. But one thing I find interesting about this, you don't have to be an A+ student. We could get our retention rate up to 86%. Just have a 2.5 or higher. You're more likely to succeed. I'm very interested in math and students' math performance. Math is it's about 79% of our students take a math class in their first year. So I asked Ted and Deb to look at what's the relationship between your performance in a math class and the likelihood that you'll return. And again, not surprisingly, students who do well return really drops off here. They might say, well, that's fine, okay. One of the issues is that depending on the math class you're talking about, this represents about 40% of the students, 35%, I don't exaggerate, 35% of the students who take the class, right? So that's a problem, right? So that it's, if it was like, if 50% of the students were getting A's, we'd be great, but about 35% are getting a D, F, or withdrawing from the class. So they have a very low return rate. Another thing I was interested in was about whether or not students withdraw from a class. And I thought this was an interesting finding, that if a student in their first year withdraws from one or more classes, whether there's about a 55% chance that they're going to come back here for a second year. If they don't withdraw from any, we're up to 79%. And then finally, we had to look just at, it's another variation looking at the grades, but if you had one grade of C, D, or F, it was 70%. If you had no C, D, or Fs, you were up at 87%. Okay. Before anyone else says it or asks, no, I'm not here to recommend we dumb down our grading to keep students here. That's not my intention. But I think we need to think about how to help these students to be more successful. They are who we have, we work with here at the University of Maine. We need to think about and come up with different ways to work with them. I'll show you one more thing about students. We've asked to figure out when do they leave. It's actually this bimodal thing. We lose a lot in their first. They had to start from October 15. That's census day. But a lot we lose basically between semesters, right? They did not do well in their first semester typically, or they decided for other reasons that University was not for them and they don't come back. We lose a few then, but then the other big chunk is coming back for their second year, and for a variety of reasons, they don't come back. Now I just kind of picked and chose some data. Ted Kodachi and Deb Allen did a really nice report I gave you this summer. It's on first year retention, student success at UMaine, exploratory analysis, because what I did is I gave them, I think, 4 or 5 questions. I said, what data do we have relevant to these questions? And then I said, and you come up with a bunch of other questions too. So they gave a really nice report. The data are much more nuanced and detailed than I have shared with you. But you can look at this. It's online. It's on, go to the Provost website, Academic Affairs Forum, and the report is there. And you can look at it. It breaks things down in a variety of ways. They look at the common first year courses, how many students take what course, what percentage courses, and for those common courses, what's the success rate in those courses. It looks at some of the information that we get from the student survey that we do at orientation. What do they think they're going to do versus how they do? It's really quite interesting. Okay. So I don't want to just talk about it. I mentioned to you that I was on this committee called GRIT, and I was a new dean. I'd go and I'd leave. I think all we did was talk about it. All we did was say, "Wow, that's oh man, boy, we got to do." We never did anything. So I don't want to do that. So I have what I have is I'd call it an outline of a plan. Well, a plan to create a plan. If you I could sit in my office and come up with a plan, but I know it'll be a lot better if I have the university community helping and working with us on the plan. So part of my agenda for today is I hope I've gotten you to think, yeah, this is important. There is something we can do about it. Now is where I'm trying to put the hook in and say, we need help. So what I want to do is talk with you about what I have in mind about how we'll go about creating a plan to address this. So let me just go through some basic things. Here are what I'd call the guiding principles. In our plan, what we want to do is look at things that we can do something about. Right? So if our plan is we need to raise the salaries for K-12 teachers, which might be a nice thing, and if we could do that, sustain it, maybe a long time. That's not a good plan, right? We want to look at what we can do, we here at the university broadly, we here within each unit at the university, as opposed to looking at the things we cannot control. Not that those things aren't important, but it's not a good use of any of our time. We're going to recommend we take a very multi-pronged approach to this problem. I've talked this idea through with the deans at the Dean's Council. I talked about it at the Provost Council, talked about it at the President's Cabinet. I met with the Rise Center folks and talked about this a little bit. And at least twice I've gotten the feedback of, Jeff, your plan sounds like you want to throw the kitchen sink at this. And why not do it in a stepwise fashion and do one thing and then another and another. And then maybe that's a good idea. But I don't think so. And here's why. When I go and look at other institutions that have been successful, so I've mentioned Georgia State for a few times, they didn't do one thing. They did a lot of things, right? And they have this mindset of doing things and looking at their data and improving upon what they do and tinker with it another time to try to look at this as something we're going to have to work at for a while if we're going to change a 20 or maybe 30-year pattern. So I would rather take a multi-pronged approach. My other defense of the multi-pronged approach is it's a problem that has multiple causes, and in fact, just the problem or the issue. Students who don't return to the University of Virginia for the second year include students who were suspended, students who got all A's and said, I'm going off to Cornell, students who were doing fine academically but flamed out socially here at the university. So we're talking about a heterogeneous group of folks. So I think we need to look at it in a variety of ways if we're going to have an impact. I've already said this, but I think our strategy, one of our guiding principles, is that we don't have to invent every solution here at the University of Maine. We should be looking around at what others are doing, borrowing their ideas, adapting them to how they fit our institution and our culture and our students. We can't take every idea and just bring it here, but there are some good ideas out there, and I think we should draw upon them. And I want our approach to be data informed. So again, I've had lots of conversations about retention and student success, and invariably when I talk with a group of faculty, and I'm even though people like Dave say you're not really, but I am real faculty. I hear some variation of, when I was a first-year student, I had a course that was really neat, and it really hooked me, and it made me want to really do great. And that's a great anecdote. I'm guilty of this too. If you ask me sometime, I'll tell you my experiences about mathematics and going from being a marginally accepted to being a math minor. And I had a first-year experience that was really great. But you know what? We're the oddballs, right? We are people who made our careers in academia. We're representative of nothing, except each other, right? So those anecdotes are really interesting. They're great entertainment. I don't want them to be the primary drivers of the decisions we make about our strategies. I want to be data informed. I don't know whenever you think of Margaret Spelling. She was George Bush, second Bush's Secretary of Education. She's now the president of the University of North Carolina system. But she has a great quote, which is, "In God we trust, everyone else bring data." And that is what I'd like to have as our sort of philosophical approach to this. We have ideas, where are the data, and what data do we have, or what data do we need to get to test out some of our assumptions. So, like any good effort, we put together a steering committee, and I should have made a bigger deal out of this at the outset. I apologize to Robert and Kenda. This is clearly an academic affairs, student affairs initiative. We're working on this together. We realize that you can do a lot of good things in the classroom, but if you're not looking at the whole student, you're not going to be as successful as you could be. Similarly, focusing only on the student's social experiences here is great, but we've got to be able to do a better job of connecting these things, looking at the whole student. And one kind of broad way to break that apart is in academic affairs and student affairs. So Robert, Kenda, John Lawler from Residential Life is a participant in this. Deb is essential, with our data person, and is helping. And the Faculty Senate has given me, has told me they have 2 people. I'm waiting for the names. I don't have the names.
We gave it to the other Jeff.
Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, we'll resolve that mystery, and we'll add folks from a couple of folks from the Faculty Senate who we really want to partner with on this. As I talk more about the plan, there's a big role for faculty, and I'd rather be with them than trampled by them. So here's sort of a timeline of the way I'm thinking about this. So in the summer, we collected data. Again, thank you, Deb Allen and Ted Collin Archie. We formed a steering committee. We did some planning and thinking about how to go about this. Right now, we're at the fall launch. Here we are. There are 2 parts, or at least the way I'm thinking about this, is 2 parts, 2 big sections of this plan to make a plan. And one involves creating some working groups to look at different aspects of this problem, and I'm going to walk you through those. And the second part involves a charge directly to the faculty. That'll probably be the less popular part, but I do want to walk through these today. My goal is that I'm going to give these working groups a charge, and then I want to have them come back to our steering committee with reports sometime in the spring semester. And then we can look together at the different pieces and look at how do we weave these together. I'm working with the president and with Claire to see what kind of money we can bring to the table on this. I don't have a dollar amount right now, but I recognize this won't be a budget neutral thing, right? The working groups that I asked to put together, I want them to give me their recommendations, and I realize that some of those recommendations are going to cost money. We're going to bring this together and look at that, and even though I'd like to launch everything by next fall, we probably will end up doing this in steps. But anyway, we'll spend the summer getting ready, and we want to try to start implementing our plan by the fall. Okay. So, as I said, this is the way I've been thinking about this. I'd like to get some folks to get together in working groups to look at pieces of this problem and pieces of this challenge, and to come back with a set of recommendations. And when the way they look, each working group, I'll give a individualized charge, but the themes that I talked about earlier will appear. I'm asking people to look at best practices. What are other institutions, how are they addressing some of these things, right? And I can help with that. This EAB company we have a contract with, they do best practices research. We can ask them, your working groups, to say, get me everything you know about this, right? So that's one piece. Second piece is, again, I want to be looking at data, our own data, right? We don't want to solve problems unless we can realize that, yeah, we're targeting in the correct way. And then I want folks to come forward with recommendations. So here's how I've got these organized. And again, this is open to discussion. Okay, so one big area, and again, looking at the literature nationally, talking to our president, well, these courses that end up with the term gateway courses are a stumbling block for students throughout the United States. And again, with nothing but positive feelings, I'll say, they tend to be math, chemistry, biology, English 101, and to a little lesser extent, Psych 100. They're these entry-level courses, and they're the gateway to the university. There are students oftentimes in their first semester taking these courses. And so there are special challenges with that. Again, as I said, there's a national conversation about these gateway courses and how to be more successful. I don't want to put together a working group on gateway courses. I want to put together 3 working groups. One is to look at how we can do a better job, and I'm calling it placement, preparation, and progress. Here at the University of Maine, the only placement testing we do is for math. And we use a system that was created here at the University of Maine. It's a homegrown system. And we try our best to get students to take it during orientation or shortly after that. And it gives an indication about what math class you should go into. Now, I'm about to quote the math faculty, so this is not me saying this is quoting respected, well-known, good math faculty. It doesn't work. Another variation is it's not valid in doing this. And you can ask Natasha or Jen to tell you how they know that. They've explained to me, and I'm not surprised to hear that, but So thing one is to look at how we do a better job of that. I already said almost 80% of our students are taking math in their first year. How do we do a better job of getting them in the right math class? But how do we do a better job to help them to be prepared to succeed in that math class, right? You know, we can say to them, you took this, you test into pre-calculus. Or we could say, you took this, we recommend you start in pre-calculus, but we also recommend you brush up on these skills, because our testing shows that you're weak in these areas. And if you're going to succeed, you don't have to go back and take college algebra. But there are skills within college algebra that you're weak on. How can we help you to prepare that? I showed you this tool, Alex. Alex claims to do that. I haven't done a thorough analysis of Alex. There are other tools out there. What I want to do is ask a group to help look at that. How can we do placement better here at the university? How can we create a tool that not only helps to place students, but helps them to either helps them to figure out how to be prepared, or helps us to provide them the right resources to be prepared, so that when they get here, they're going to more likely to succeed. How can we use tools to progress? I'm going to point out Gen Tyne again, because I think they're doing an innovative thing in Calc 1, right, where they do the, what do you call those? Gateway tests, not to be confused with gateway courses. But they're tests they're essentially mastery tests. You need to do this in order to move on. You can take the test as many times as you want, you're not being great on it, but to get it, you've got to get to a certain point to move ahead in this course. Are there ways we can take that kind of idea and bring it to scale? Right? There are tools that are out there being created by folks who bring a lot of resources to this that we can use to help us with that. So I want to get a group to help me look at how can we do a better job in this placement preparation arena. I want to put together a group to help look at summer preparation. There are different stealing ideas. University of Nevada, Reno does something called Nevada Fit. It's 1 week where students come and they take actually a 1 credit hour math class. But they also learn about how to access resources on the campus. They learn about studying. And they learn about the skills of being a successful student. They don't have every student there. They have identified students who are at risk, and they invite them to Nevada Fit for 1 week prior to the semester. They have encouraging data on underrepresented groups in particular performing better after they've been through Nevada Fit. Is that an idea that we want to steal? Do we want to look at a variation of that? How do we use summer courses, summer school, the summer university, in a better way to do that? I already mentioned we're doing summer early college things. Are there other things that we can do to help students to be prepared when they get here? The third group within this area I want to get is so folks look at, it's a challenge to teach gateway courses, right? I see Mitchell Bruce who does it, I see Farad does it. They're very good, I know they're dedicated and committed to this. It's a challenge. It has its special challenges and to do it. How can we do a better job in faculty support and faculty development? Can we get the Center for Innovation, Teaching and Learning to take a lead on this, to look at what are the resources that people need? What can we do to do a better job of professional development so people are more likely to be successful? What are the resources that we could bring to bear to help them in this challenging task of these larger gateway classes. President Farini Mundi is interested, quite interested in this. She's, as you know, a math education expert. And, there are data that show, success has a lot to do with the quality of instruction, right? So how do we help to get the best quality instruction? All right, the second broad area I'm calling onboarding is advising and support. Right now, every student at the University of Maine has access to a first-year success course. Some are required to take them. What do we know about what makes a successful first-year success course? What do we know? What are the best practices, and what does the literature say? I was at a meeting earlier this week and learned about University of Texas Austin is doing something where they have, it's actually integrated with a regular course, but it's sort of connected to this first-year success course. And it's about helping students to develop what they call a growth mindset, as opposed to a pass-fail mindset, as opposed to saying, I'm a first-year college student, I'm not doing well, I'm not cut out for college, I can't do this. To take a more of a growth mindset. What are the skills I don't have now? What are the things I need to work on to be more successful? Some interesting, again, preliminary, but interesting ideas. So we'd be looking at integrating some of those in what we do. New student orientation. I'd like to get a group together to say, are we using that time to the best ability that we can? Or what else can we do? We have good folks in all of our academic support services areas, and I happen to know that all of these four could use more resources. I also happen to know that we're not sitting on a pot of gold. So how do we figure out to make investments in these areas? I'd like to get the academic support services group to be working to look at together, are there better ways we can utilize these resources? Some of this could be tied to the Navigate tool that we've talked about. Some of it could be tied to other things. So I'd like to get a group together and look at academic support services. All right, as I said, a lot of this is, we're looking at collaboration with student affairs. We do some living learning communities where students who have similar academic interests are housed together, and there's some innovative things that you can do around that. Are there things we can do to do more in living learning communities? Robert and I talked about this, so kind of couldn't come up with a catchy title, so we came with a very long one. Academic Affairs, Student Affairs Alliance Enhancement. The thing about this is, I'm going to let some air in here, it's about, there are a lot of things that we do in interaction between student affairs and academic affairs. Can we do those better? What are other models that other institutions do to grow and improve the quality of communication between these two areas? Would create a charge for a group to look at that. And then there's this idea of a student success hub. This is something that Dr. Dana and I have talked about for quite a while. Could we set up something here in the Union at a central location that's like a one-stop shop for students? The analogy we were thinking about was like an Apple Genius store. In theory, you can go in there with any question and they'll be able to get the answer for it. I've never tried, but that's what I've been told. Could we create something like that here in the Union? There are other institutions that are trying things that sort of approximate that. Can we learn from their ideas? In order to do it, what does it take? Obviously, it takes more than space. Right? What are the trainings that would be required? How feasible is this? What budget would it take to really do this in a way that's likely to succeed? I'd like to get a group of people together to investigate that. Again, to give you a series of questions to guide it. I want to put a group together around financial. There's a variety of things that institutions we could do that were around financial aid, around the way we use work study. We know there's a lot of literature on this. You look at what's called grade point based scholarships. So we have our flagship match. A flagship match, is for students from out of state. They get a tuition scholarship that brings the cost of attending here down to equal to the cost of their home institution. But they have to maintain a 3.0 GPA. If they lose that, they lose that scholarship. That's a big chunk of change, and that's a big thing. I haven't yet, but I'm going to ask Deb and Ted to look at how many students who lose that scholarship do we retain here at the University of Maine. Now, maybe we shouldn't retain any of them, but maybe we should retain some of them. Again, I'll give you an example from Georgia State again. Georgia State has a scholarship called the Hope Scholarship, and apparently it's very generous. You have to maintain a 3.0 to maintain your Hope Scholarship. And not surprisingly, students who fall below 3.0 and lose their Hope Scholarship don't return at high frequencies, if you will, or they have low return rates. So they looked at that and they said, well, wait a minute, why don't we look at the students who are below? They've lost their Hope Scholarship, but they're not that far below. So they did a study looking at students who are 2.75 to 2.99. And they said to those students, let's develop a recovery plan so that you can earn back your Hope Scholarship. And we're not going to give scholarship, but we will give you a little bit of money if you'll develop a plan and work with us. And there's other pieces to it. You got to come in every week and touch base. And, but we'll give you $500 a semester, which is a lot less than the Hope plan, but to help you if you'll develop a plan. And there, many of those students, many more of those students continued on at the university, regained their Hope Scholarship and were able to continue. Are there innovative ways that we can look at the way we use financial aid to do something like that? Some universities are exploring looking at some financial aid to be more like a paycheck. You perform at a certain point, then you get your next chunk of financial aid. And I can see the folks in the registrar going, no, don't do that. But could we approximate that? Are there things, there are things that we can think differently about it. I also am very interested in work. Again, whenever I talk with faculty about students success or students being retained, they'll say, my students are working 30 hours a week. And I know there are students who work 30 hours a week. I don't know how many of those students are. I don't know what's the relationship between how many hours a week you work and whether or not you're likely to come back to the institution. I have a hunch that there's probably a relationship, that the higher you go in working hours, the less likely you are to come back. But again, I want to be data driven. Is that a good hunch? Is it a linear relationship, or is there some kind of curvilinear piece? And if that's true, there are ways that we can look at alternatives for those students. Again, some universities are doing things where they're helping students look at long-term, in a structured way, their long-term goals versus their short-term goals. Students giving up on some cash that they get from going from 15 hours a week to 25 hours, and they work less, start going from 25 to 15, they earn less cash, and they can't do things right now that they want to do. But helping students to think about that versus their longer term goals, and what are the consequences of thinking about that differently. Again, just some ideas that I'd like to have us try to explore. And then finally, I don't need a working group because we already have a steering committee around Navigate this tool. And we're going to bring that on board in the spring. Now, as I think about this, if I was a more clever person, I would put together some kind of diagram that shows how all these things interact. But I couldn't come up with one. It didn't look like a spider web. So, but that's the idea, is that if I can get working groups in each of these areas, I'll give them a specific set of questions that I'd like them to address. I can ask them to spend some time doing it. We'll provide resources to help you to answer those questions. And then as a group, come back and say, we've looked at this. We've looked at the way other institutions are handling this. We've looked at our own data, and here's some recommendations that we have. And we come back to the steering committee, and then the steering committee, again, in a public way, will come back and say, look, here's what we're thinking in terms of the plan. Now, I know I've yammered on a little too long, so I am gonna, oh, here's my thing. So what am I asking for you, right? I'm looking for people to volunteer. So if you're so inclined, you can shout out right at this moment, and Robin will take your name down. If you're not so inclined, that's okay too. You can go to the website, just look under Academic Affairs. You can send me an email and say, yeah, I'm interested, or maybe I'm interested, tell me more what it's going to involve. Or you can get a friend in trouble. I think so-and-so will be really good at this. And I'll reach out to them. If you want something to make sure something happens, you'll copy Robin, because she'll make sure of it. You can also go to the Provost website, Academic Affairs Faculty Forum. As I said, you can review this material if that's so inclined, but there'll be a space for you to share your ideas and share your resources. As I said, I've been talking about this with different groups. I talked with the folks at the Rise Center, Natasha Spear sent me an email with a couple of really good ideas about other institutions are doing that I can help. Will help as I can ask the working group, I can give them that information to pursue further. All right. I'm going to try to do this next piece a little bit quickly, but it is an important part. You can think about, if you look at these working groups that I put together, they're about doing a better job in general, providing support for students and helping students to be successful. But of course, a lot of what happens that's very important happens in the classroom and in the curriculum. I'm very interested in having our campus look at first-year curriculum. And I know that the people who have to look at that are the faculty. And I know it's not the faculty at large, it's the faculty at the unit, because that's where the program level is. We have 90 undergraduate degrees here, roughly, at the University of Maine. So in theory, we might have 90 first-year curricula. Now I know that students have some choice in their first-year curricula, but some are more set than others. Look at engineering at one end and maybe a large study at the other end in terms of how proscriptive they are about the first-year curriculum. But what I'm interested in is having the campus, having faculty groups look at and take some time to think about their first-year curricula. Let me show you. I'll show you what I'm thinking. So what I'm thinking is to ask groups to articulate what is the first-year curriculum. What's required of your students in that first year? What are the major requirements, and what are the general education requirements? So I'm thinking, if you're an engineering major, you got to take calculus, right? Math 126. So that's a requirement. It's a gen ed requirement, but it's also a major requirement. What are they for your area? And again, I know for many years they only have 1 or 2 required courses in the first semester, and there's options. But I'm also interested in do you have a recommended first-year curriculum? Right? What do you recommend for a first-year student? Again, recognizing students have a choice. For those of you with a good memory, I gave a talk, one of these talks last year about our general education requirements. And in my opinion, we give students too many choices. You can look at just the area of, is it human values and social context? Okay. Who wants to guess how many possible permutations there are of the courses you could take to fulfill that requirement? Any guess? Come on, take a guess. One person.
75.
34 billion. There are 34 billion permutations of courses you could take to fill those 6 area requirements. Right? Well, to me, that raises questions about the learning outcomes associated with those. We give students so many choices. I'm interested in your major, and I'm not even saying you'd have to say specific courses, but specific areas. You might, if you're, so look at Steve Barkin, if you're a sociology major, you might consider taking some courses in psychology or in political science in these areas, right? I think that it would help our students if we decrease their choices early on, or may help them, say it a different way, help them to make intelligent choices early on in their career. So I'm interested in what folks' recommendations are. Then what I'm interested in is the more important question, which is why. Why is this the first year recommended course? Are there expected student learning outcomes? And then the empirical question, all right, if this is it, what evidence do you have that it's working? How well are we succeeding in this, with our students taking this curriculum? And I'll give you an example with this is University of Maine data. If you're a first year student, and I'm not sure if this is true, I think it is, and you are required to take, again, Mitchell, I've already given you this example with all due respect. If you're required to take Gen Chem and either Math 122 or Math 126, pre-calc or calc, okay? If you are taking both those courses, and you're a University of Maine student, and I randomly select you from University of Maine students, there's a 40% chance that you'll pass both. Those are our data. A 40% chance that you will pass both of those courses. Remember what I showed you. If you fail a single course or withdraw from a single course, 55% chance you're going to come back for your second year. If those 2 courses are required, and maybe, I'd like the groups to have some conversation about why is that sequence? Is there another sequence that we could do? Or is there a way of segmenting the students to say, For you, because of the good work we've done in placement, testing, or other reasons, you know, the probabilities are higher. You take this. For you, you know, if you do this, the probability that you're going to pass most of these courses is 40% or lower, right? And how do we help students? Not to say you can't be this major, not to say, no, you're going to fail as a University of Maine student, but we recommend against this. And here's another path. So that's the next question I'll ask the group is, what are the risks? So again, multiple high failure course. And in light of those risks, are there alternative paths? Are there multiple paths to get to the same endpoint? And can we do a better job of addressing students? Once we've identified what the risks are, what's in place to mitigate those risks, and what else can we do to mitigate them? Now, I know this is academia, so I have the kind of power of persuasion, and there's very few people I can direct to do anything. But I can direct the deans to do stuff. So and I've discussed this with the deans. So I'm going to direct the deans to then go in their colleges and work with their departments and to get faculty looking at these questions. Right? What we want to do is to have a thoughtful, data-informed discussion about, are we setting our students up for failure or success? What can we do to change? Are there ways that we can think differently about our approach to their education that is going to change the percentage of those students who are going to succeed in that? I'm not worried about those students who have a C index of 80, 90, or 95. They're going to be fine, right? But they are not all of our students. And if we design our curriculum just around those students, we're doing a disservice and we're not fulfilling our mission.